I do talk about will the real Robert stand up, where I was in a situation where I had a choice to either keep on the masks and, be that old persona, or make a decision to be myself.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland Labrador's first podcast about living with communication disorders. It is a production of the Communication Collaborative. My name is Greg O'Grady. I'm a person who stutters and your host. Some Stutter Law aims to rebuild confidence and hope for people who live with communication differences by dismantling myths, stigmas, stereotypes, and barriers. For more information about the Communication Collaborative or this podcast, you can find us on somestutterlaw.ca. If you only get one thing from this podcast, we hope it's this. It's okay to stutter and it's okay to communicate differently. It's not how we communicate that's important, it's the message that's important. Today, Some Stutter Law welcomes published author Robert O'Brien. Uh, Robert, welcome to Some Stutter Law. And just in just to provide our listeners a little background about Robert. Uh, first of all, as I mentioned, Robert just recently has published a book, Just One More Drive: The True Story of a Stuttering Homosexual and His Race Car, and it is a memoir written by an Irish-Canadian author, Robert O'Brien, through Tidewater Press. It deals with a range of issues including stuttering, homosexuality, and suicide. Ultimately, this book traces the author's life as he navigates these challenges and ends up with the reassuring conclusion that there is nothing to be fixed. Now, just a little background about Robert. Robert started stuttering from the age of 8 and struggled with his speech into his adult years, discovering speech therapy, Toastmasters, and eventually acting school in Vancouver, BC. At the same time, he is dealing with being gay and hiding his sexuality until finally coming out at the age of 32. His focus throughout was to fix himself after a failed suicide attempt. He was inspired to write a memoir called Just One More Drive: The True Story of a Stuttering Homosexual and His Race Car, to help others dealing with issues around mental health and acceptance. His book is on sale globally and he has given various workshops sharing his experiences. He currently resides in Vancouver, BC, working as a teacher and a co-instructor for the Unblockables, an improv acting course for people who study with Tightrope Theatre. Other written works include The Mini, a strategic relaunch of a dormant brand, Lambert, and this is published through Lambert Academic Publishing 2016. So Robert, congratulations on writing and publishing your book. Now, before I start, Robert, I'm going to ask you a question. Am I talking to the real Robert? Stand up. Because you mentioned in your book in chapter 28, will the real Robert stand up? So do you want to share a little bit about that to our listeners?
Okay, you're jumping in at the very end of the book, Greg. Yeah,
No, I know.
no, it's cool. Like you said, I grew up with a stutter, and I grew up being gay, and I always assumed I needed to be fixed, and I learned to wear many masks and pretend to be someone else. So when it came to having a stutter, I basically tried to hide it. I tried to pretend to be fluent. I would hide the fear, I would hide emotion, excitement, I wouldn't ask for things. And I came across as a very passive, meek person, a very frightened person. And in many ways, I actually was. And being homosexual at the same time, there was a lot of overlap in terms of fear, thinking it was wrong, and shame. And I was always trying to fit in, to find my place and fit in society as a child and as a teenager in school. And so I never really I I didn't know who I actually was to be able to show people. And in the process of writing the book and in that sort of journey of coming out and accepting my speech and my sexuality, in the last few years, I've begun to figure out who I really am. And so that sort of latter chapter, 28, is just pretty much towards the end of the book, where I do talk about will the real Robert stand up, where I was in a situation where I had a choice to either keep on the masks and, be that old persona, or make a decision to be myself. And to what you're actually referring to in chapter 28, it was about giving a presentation. And I was nervous, I was apprehensive. I hadn't brought any PowerPoint presentations where other presenters had. And I was tempted to, fall back into that learned persona of, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. Everyone's laughing at me. I'm a total mess up. I'm never going to be a success. And I had to catch myself and go, hold on a second. You've been invited. You've prepared a presentation. You don't need overheads. And this came down to a decision. Would the real Robert stand up? And that meant fully embracing the whole situation and myself. And it was the first time that I really consciously saw that I had that choice. Having a stutter, I didn't choose to have a stutter, and I always resented it. I always played the victim card because I didn't choose this. But what I've begun to realize is I do have a choice in how I deal with it. I have a choice in my relationship to it. And that has changed over the years, from fixing and trying to
Mm-hmm.
be fluent to accepting, and having to let go of being perfect. Having to let go of being perfect. Even now, as we're giving this podcast, like the fact that we had a few technical issues in the past, I'd have been totally taken out. I wouldn't be fully focused on this task. I'd be thinking about how you will all think I'm a total mess up. And it's like, no, that's not the case. But it's funny what I've discovered. I had linked that to my stutter. If I had perfect speech, I thought I'd be perfect. And what I've learned is, whether I'm fluent or not fluent, I'm never perfect, and no one is perfect. But that's a hard lesson. And I think for someone who has a stutter, and for myself, I sort of had always felt I was much less perfect than other people because of my speech and because it's so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
People hear us when we're disfluent, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a thing that's not understood. And I felt very broken.
Mm-hmm. Robert, would one of the reasons why I started off with this question is because I've read your book, and I highly recommend it as well. But for you to say at the end of the book that will the real Robert stand up? It's obvious, from reading your journey, and it's quite obvious because you're very transparent within the book about all the experiences and the emotional trauma you've gone through. But just to reach that point when you're saying, will the real Robert stand up? It showed me that this is a new Robert, this is a new beginning, and this is a sort of a confident Robert, and so so I really applaud you, Robert, for I mean for writing your story and sharing it with us. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about your earlier journey as a person who stutters? When did you realize it, and how did you I guess handle it?
Mm. So I began stuttering at around 7 or 8. I was bullied as a child. I was very nice and very good as a child, and I went to a Catholic school. So I might as well have had a bullseye painted on my back. But I was bullied, and it wasn't anything too physical. It was more name calling and feeling left out. And I remember being very confused. I was like, I don't understand what I've done wrong. You know, what have I said that was actually wrong? What have I said that has incurred these bullies' wrath? And that's when I began to have speech issues. And it began with a kind of fear of speaking up in class. Then it became a fear of saying my name, reading out in class. And that kind of spread outside of school. I became a lot more cautious. I was always on the lookout. Where is the threat? Where is the speaking situation? How do I deal with this? And I dealt with it by trying to be overly nice, trying to be incredibly passive and quiet. I thought if I didn't attract attention, I would just, slip on by, as it were. And even though I appeared very passive and I would never ask for anything or have any of my needs met, there was a massive amount of underlying fear of being hurt again, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of asking for things, and just a huge amount of fear. And that only fed the stutter, because as you all know and as your listeners know, when we get nervous and fearful, our speech is usually the first thing to go. And that's how I dealt
Mm-hmm.
with it for many
Mm-hmm.
many years. And even up into my university years, I can remember in my graduation year, in fourth year, I was excused from giving a presentation with a group of other students. And obviously I had approached the lecturer and I'd explained my stutter, and he had excused me. But it always felt like I was getting out of jail free, or I was skipping out on fully taking part in life. And that was really pretty much how I dealt with things. I would avoid them, I would try to be nice. And it was just exhausting, to be quite honest, because what would happen every 6 months or so, there would be a speaking situation, there would be a telephone caller, there would be teacher asking me to read in class. Like, it didn't matter how much I tried to avoid it, I was always caught out. And as soon as that happened, I would spiral into the same cycle of self-hate and fear and panic and anger, and cursing the universe for giving me this stutter, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how the early years were.
So, Robert, would you classify yourself during that period as a covert person who
Oh yeah,
stutters?
absolutely.
Like doing a lot of hiding, word substitution.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the unfortunate fact, I was very good at that. So I could pass 90% of the time. And that kind of made it worse, because I thought I could pass most things. Maybe I didn't need to deal with my stutter.
Mm-hmm. There's there's a point in your book when you work for a car washing company. The phone rang, and you really had a lot of went through a lot of emotional turmoil. And would you consider that a breaking point, Robert, when you said you needed to do something about your stutter? Do you
Yeah.
want to share a little bit about that experience?
So yeah, as I just said, I basically hid my stutter up until I graduated university. I had a honors marketing degree from Trinity College, and I thought if I got into so yeah, sorry for your listeners over in Newfoundland, or anyone overseas. Trinity College is one of our highest, most prestigious universities here, and I thought if I went there and graduated from Trinity, things would happen and I'd be fine. But what happened? I had finished my final exams. I was exhausted, and I decided to take a year off. Now, the honest to God truth was I didn't know what to actually do. After college finished, I didn't have any plans. I knew that my speech was a huge issue. It mightn't have appeared like that on the surface, but I myself knew. I knew the fear of giving a presentation or using the phone. And in a professional setting, I was not going to survive the first day, never mind the first week. And I found a job in a car washing firm, and it was it was a very basic job. It was car washing. I had purposely sought it out because I like cars, and washing cars meant I wouldn't have to talk to anyone. But on the first day of the job, I was told I was going down to their other car facility, where I would have to transfer car insurance from the customer cars to our garage rental cars, and that would mean making phone calls. I hadn't expected this, so I was left alone in the office. I was given a file. I was given a list of current cars and all of the insurance information, and I had to just basically phone and transfer insurance. And for any fluent speaker, this would be a very simple job. All the information is in front of you. You don't have to do anything except speak on the phone. So you can imagine, I was
Mm,
terrified, and to my shame, I well, no, to my credit, I did understand the importance of this, and I understood that I should try. So I picked up the phone and I said, just make one phone call and go from there. And I tried. I really tried to speak fluently on the phone. I couldn't even get hello out, and I panicked. I put the phone down, I closed the file, and I literally ran out of the office, and I ran out of the job. I just walked out, and I kept on walking for hours, and that was a breaking point. It was the wake up call that if I didn't start dealing with my stutter, it didn't matter how covert I was. If I didn't start dealing with this, I wouldn't be able to actually have any kind of job to earn any sort of money or income and support myself. And that's what really set me on the path.
mm,
And it's still there, Greg. Like, in like all honesty and full disclosure, even now professionally, I'm sort of at a crossroads, and I still have that same fear. It's like if I get some other job and I have to use the phone, or if I stutter. And it's funny, I've got tools and techniques, and I've grown a lot in the past 20 years since that event. But it I find it interesting that it still lingers and it still affects me. And I still find the phone a challenge. It's never easy or fun. And that's one area that I'm still working on my own speech.
mhm, mhm. So you're saying, Robert, that I mean the the phobia about I guess the phobia, the fear of this, the the stuttering. Do you feel that the stuttering is still alive or well, or still alive and well, or have you been able to manage it? It doesn't control you as much, because I know in the book you mentioned that you took the McGuire program. That must have helped you a great deal. So has that sort of helped to, I guess, not just to negate some of the pressure of the stutter. Do you want to share a little bit about the McGuire program and how that has helped you?
Yeah, sure. So after that job event, and after the job, when I walked out, I realized I would have to deal with my stutter, and it was a funny situation. Three people independently of each other had given me the same newspaper article about this amazing stuttering course that was given by people who had a stutter for people who have a stutter, which was the first groundbreaking aspect. I had obviously been to speech therapy as a child, and that was a very formal type of therapy, and it was with a professional speech pathologist. But this course was given by people who had stutters. They understood it because they also lived with it, and that was the first thing that I noticed. And I didn't I I didn't want to do it, but I also didn't feel I had a choice. It was like, if three people are giving you this article, maybe it's a sign. And I can remember signing up, and I didn't have to telephone. You could send an email or have a relative phone, and it was a 4-day course at the time. And what they basically teach is costal breathing. So it's deep costal breathing, and you learn other tools and techniques that help you to control your speech. And then you go out in the real world and you use these techniques and make disclosures. But the biggest thing for me with the McGuire program was these were my tribe. These were my people. I mean, as much as my friends and family loved me, they didn't understand, how does it feel when you can't say your name? How does it feel when someone laughs in your face when you're in the midst of a speech block? Now, sure, they can try to understand, they can empathize, but they don't know. And so this was the first time in my life. I was literally in a hotel room with, with over 100 people who had stutters, and I thought I was the only one. And it was the most amazing 4 days of my life, because I did feel on some level like I was coming home. It did help. It gave me tools that I didn't know before, and it was also the beginning of the shifting of my perception of myself from an out of control stutterer to a recovering stutterer. And it's I mean, in the book, it's the single biggest chapter in the book, where I break down the 4-day course as it was. Now at the moment, it's actually a 3-day course. They've made it a little bit more streamlined, but I spent a lot of time, and I wanted the reader to, kind of come with me on the journey from the first day and the first night, with all the fear and the apprehension and the doubt, to the final day, where I had gone out on the streets of Dublin, and made contacts and disclosures with people, and I had talked about having a stutter, and it really was amazing. And you know it was great. And to answer the second question that you asked me, like, in terms of my relationship with my stutter, when I did the first course initially, I was very much about fluency. Here are the tools, here are the techniques, and now I'm going to be a fluent speaker. And that's also changed in the last 20 years, or, well, God, I think it's been less than 20 years, but it has shifted from fluency to, as you asked, having a healthier relationship with my stutter. I've had to learn the hard way to be softer and kinder with myself. When I was going for fluency, if I was disfluent in any way, it was like, no, you can't be disfluent. Overkill that, practice it 1,000 times. And it was very much about all or nothing. And as I've matured, that sort of stuttering relationship has become softer. It's still there. I still get nervous around the phone, and I still have disfluent, disfluent spells. But what has changed, rather than me panicking and trying to practice, I just take a breath and go, okay, that didn't go very well. I'm not particularly happy with it. What do I need in this moment? Do I need to take a pause? Do I need to look and take care of myself? Do I need to walk away? Do I need to walk back and explain it? And that's been the real transformation. And that from the book, I think that, or I hope that is shown in the book, because it's that shift that, that has really changed. But it did begin initially with that first memoir program all those years ago. Definitely, it's been quite a journey.
Mm. Mm. Robert, when you're talking about the McGuire program, you learn speech targets to help you control or manage your stuttering. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, when you compare the amount of energy it takes to really sort of commit to developing to fine tune these targets versus your original stuttering, because it takes a lot of energy to stutter. We know it I mean, I know that as well, especially when I have my prolongations, my blockages. I mean, it can drain one physically as well as emotionally and psychologically. From your perspective, what is and I shouldn't say the better, what is best to maintain the original stutter or put more energy into the speech targets? Do you struggle with that sometimes?
Oh yeah, yeah. Even now, like I'm actually home now at the moment in Dublin planning a book event, and I've been thinking to myself, how is my speech? Have I been practicing all of the tools and techniques that I know? Because I've probably become sloppy or less focused on those firm targets. It's a difficult question, and I'm going to preface it very clearly by saying, just speaking for myself, from my own experience, not as an expert in any way, shape, or form, and not to discredit anybody. I think there's a balance. Being an out of control stutterer is a horrible feeling because you're living in total panic and fear, and you're at the mercy of your speech,
Hmm.
and you're never going to know how that's going to be. The other side, looking for perfection and control, whether that's whether that's in the form of the course I did, or with other professional speech pathologists. There's various tools and techniques that people learn. They also have their place, but I feel personally, to go, like, for example, if I have a goal to say a particular word 50 times in a day, and I end up only doing it 44 times, do I come home and start beating myself over the head because I haven't achieved 50? Or can I be can I be generous enough with myself and say, you've done 44? You've done 44. You haven't done your 50 goal, but look at what you have achieved. How were those 44?
Hmm.
I think for myself, Greg, and it goes back to what I said earlier, the personal evolution of being kinder to myself and accepting that there will be times when my speech will be shaky. There will be times when my speech will be good. I I certainly believe you should look at that and go, what's going on? Am I tired? Am I stressed? Is there a reason that my speech might be shaky today? And if there is, to certainly look and see. Um, because you don't want to be at the mercy of that. But it really is, it's a kind of middle ground, if that makes sense, coming from being out of control on one side
Hmm.
to being rigorously goal focused on the other. I personally believe that for any sort of mature stutterer, we I think eventually reach a point where it's the middle. We figure out what actually works for us. Take whatever tools work, leave other tools if they don't work. Having a support group, whether that's on a course, whether it's online, I do firmly believe in that. I don't think we can do it all by ourselves, and there's so many groups for people who stutter out there that having support is also crucial, and just being softer with yourself. Um, Other than that,
Mm,
it just becomes really tricky. And it's funny, not to go off topic, but being homosexual at the same time, that kind of journey of self acceptance and coming out, it's a very similar feeling. It's like, I'll never be a fluent speaker, okay, and that's okay. It actually can be okay, and by owning that and accepting it, it brings a lot of freedom and ease, which I think is important
mm,
for all of us. But it's in the
mm,
middle. It's somewhere in the middle, and it'll be different for every person. And I think part of the journey
mm,
for all of us is to figure out where that is for us.
mm, mm. You're right, Robert. We we as people who stutter, we all have our good days and our challenging days, okay? And but we need to keep perspective as to we need to what I call it. We need to mind our minds. We need to be gentle with our minds. We need to keep things in perspective because as you mentioned, you may decide one day to say one word 50 times. You may not be successful, but we have to focus on the times, the areas we were successful. We may have been able to say this word or introduce ourselves appropriately 2 or 3 times. And I think this is where we need to be gentle with ourselves, not to sort of beat ourselves up because we weren't 100% uh, successful. So I think that's the balance there. Now I think this is where the confidence comes in, the acceptance that we will never be a fluent speaker. Well, because there's no cure for stuttering. And I think this is where we have to really sort of become comfortable with ourselves and find what works for us. But as long as we don't beat ourselves up emotionally and psychologically. Now,
Absolutely.
Robert, also just to circle back when you mentioned that now when you became aware that that you're gay now, and then you're struggling with the emotional component of stuttering. Do you want to share a little bit about that? It's almost like it's a double whammy, and
Yeah.
that could in itself be overwhelming.
Yeah, it really honestly was. And again, in the past, I thought I was the only stuttering homosexual out there. Came as quite a shock that I wasn't. It was like, really, I'm not special. There's others like me. Um, yeah, no. One of the areas that really fascinates me is the emotional overlap. I think there's a lot of similarities emotionally with coming out as gay and coming out as having a stutter. Yeah, because if you think about it, most people spend their early years trying to hide it, avoid it, and change it, and then I think if we're lucky, we're able to come out as people who stutter, or come out as people who as people who are gay at some point in our lives. And the process of coming out as someone who has a stutter felt very similar as coming out as someone who's gay. Now, I came out as gay very late. I was 32, and I figured when I was growing up, I was aware of the stutter, and I was also aware that I felt things for men, and this is in the book as well. And there was also a lot of fear around that. On some level, I thought it was wrong to feel what I felt, And when it came time to actually deal with both, I figured, well, let's deal with the stutter first, because it's the biggest issue. It's the one that's stopping me getting a job. It's the one that people see. Whereas being gay, I thought I was hiding it very well. If you read the book, you'll see that everybody knew, which was quite disappointing to me. I'm like, really? So my acting skills are really that poor? But I decided, really, I decided to try and manage my speech first, and I thought, if I'm fluent, then I can deal with being gay too. And that feeling, that kind of journey of, you know, inner hate, anger, hoping, praying, dreaming that you can sort of pray the gay away, you can pray the stutter away. And it just eventually leads to a point where you just have to be honest and you have to accept it. And it's a funny thing. I accepted being gay, even though I came out later. It was easier to accept being gay because on some level it felt authentic. Whereas having a stutter to me has never felt authentic because of the hit and miss nature of it. Like, I can be fluent and then I'm suddenly not fluent. So it's this kind of hot and cold. Whereas being gay, I was gay. And that was kind of clear. And that was kind of nice in a sense. Like there wasn't any, maybe it's, boys and girls. It was like, no, very clearly on one side of the team. So yeah, it felt the same. The sort of journey was the same. And it's still the same. Like I still get nervous when I mention having a stutter. I still get nervous in certain situations talking about sexuality, and it's that kind of taking a pause, taking a breath, and you're kind of holding it, thinking, I wonder how this is going to go. That's still there too, but much less, because I've at this point, it's not that I don't care what other people think or feel, but I'm affected less by it because I'm very clear on how I think and feel about it. But it's still there, and it still costs. And I think, to circle back to what you said, like it takes energy to be honest about having a stutter or to be honest about being gay, and we're opening ourselves up to people and to society in a very vulnerable way. And it's not often seen as the sort of manly way of doing things. And again, that's one area that I've been really looking at. Like, what does it mean to be a man and have a stutter, rather than being a boy? Like in our society, boys are told to just suck it up and, you know, be sort of big, go and like play sports. Aggression is good. There's a push, or there's less of a focus on that. And for, I think, men, it's just, yeah, it's just a sort of different flavor. And it's a sort of area I'm still trying to figure out. Like, what does it mean to be a man who has a stutter? And what does it even mean to be a gay man who has a stutter? Because there are certain preconceived notions about that. And it just ties into men's mental health, like where men aren't necessarily given the same opportunities to share about their feelings and to share about their fears. And that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to write this book. It was like, if there were any teenage boys who were gay, or teenage boys who had a stutter and thought, wow, is it only me? How do I deal with this? They could, at the very least, read this book and see that they aren't the only ones who are going through it or who have gone through it, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And like with our stutter, there are groups out there, and being able to just say that and to be able to just share that and be heard, I think there's a sort of, this is a sort of area that I think needs to actually, grow more, and to help boys and to help men to find their kind of, a place, and to be able to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Robert, I applaud you with with being so transparent within your book, because that has taken a lot of courage as well, and I'm sure just just to be as transparent, it also been a cathartic experience for you, a kind of a healing experience as well. And I'm just wondering, Robert, when did you have any concerns about what people would think about Robert being this transparent? Because you talk about suicide, you talk about your personal experiences being gay, you talk about your suicide attempt. What was your thinking? Is there a limit? Is there too much, or is this my opportunity to share? And
Yeah.
what was your focus of helping the larger community?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's there's a lot there to break down. It's a wonderful question. No, it's actually brilliant. I never set out to write a book. So you've just mentioned there to my suicide attempt, and the suicide attempt is the climax of the book. And this happened after I had come out as gay, and after I'd spent many years on on the the Maguire program, and I'd gotten a good handle on my speech. And it was so the book, obviously I'm still here, so I wasn't successful in the suicide attempt, and I was very upset at that because I couldn't even do that effectively. And that's where the book began. I thought, if I'd reached, I mean, really reached rock bottom, where do I go from here? And I did not have a clue. I had no clue where to go. And I thought, maybe if I go back to the very beginning and I start writing things down, I'll figure out where everything went totally wrong and how I can fix it. So I began keeping a personal journal, and I went back to the very beginning of my life. I wrote about the whole bullying experience, thinking I was gay, beginning to have a stutter. And this was a very cathartic experience because I began writing looking for answers, and I kept on writing. And at some point, I don't honestly know where or when, but at some point it became obvious that this was, sort of, this was more than like sort of just a sort of private journal, or it could be more than just a private journal. And I began mentioning to, people that I was, sort of kind of working on this book thing. And I kept it very vague. Um, and in terms of figuring out what to put in, what to leave out, and how vulnerable to be, as the book sort of became a book, and I began working with a copy editor and a couple of other experienced writers, and they certainly helped me focus the book, prune the book. When it became clear that this could be a book, I was very certain that it it needed to be raw. It needed to be honest. It needed to go there, and I, as the author, needed to give myself permission to go there. So it is very honest. It's very raw. When I talk about the self-hate, when I talk about the anger and the fear, it's all there. When I talk about, the whole process of coming out as gay, when I, share coming out late in life, and just some of the crazy teenage things that I did as a grown man. um it's very raw, and it needed to be. That being said, as I was writing it, and as I was actually sort of, growing my skill as a writer, I was figuring out there are certain things that needed to have a lot of information, other things didn't. So just to give a clear example of that, because having a stutter is such a key part of the book, I do talk about my first Maguire course in a lot of depth. I give a lot of time to it because I wanted the reader to fully understand and experience it. On the other hand, coming out as gay later in life meant that I felt I had to make up for lost time, and I went on a sort of glorious dating spree. And I do, also talk about having sex for the first time, but I don't go into any huge depth there because it isn't fair on other, people, and B, it doesn't actually service the book. Everyone can figure out what happened, and it doesn't really need me to have to spell it out. So I keep that vague, but it's still mentioned, and I still talk about how it affected me afterwards because that was also needed for anybody who is in the same kind of sit, sit, situation. I think that was needed in the book. So what to put in and what to leave out was a sort of balancing act where I, as the writer, got to kind of choose it, but I also had a very good team. I had a great copy editor who worked on the book over 2 or 3 years, got to know me, got to know my voice very, very well, and I trusted her too. So were certain things that were in the book that were taken out for
Mm.
various reasons. Other things were kept in the book, and in hindsight now that it's on the shelves, the one thing that I didn't ever fully think up until people began getting in touch with me was, it's a funny process writing this sort of book. People will know you in a very deep, very intimate way, and there are maybe one or two things now that I would have kept out that are in the book, and I'm like, oh well, that's just part of the learning process, It's funny, but no. Sort of answer what you've asked. I kind of hope that I've actually balanced it out. That I've kept what needed to be kept, and that it can be of service to others.
Mm. After reading your book, Robert, I see there's so many different themes that come out of your book, and I applaud you for that, for this, because it's an excellent story, and it it is a very helpful and supportive story for people who are struggling, gay, people who are stuttering and gay. And but as I was saying about the themes, I mean, you have themes such as, you're a person who stutters that needs to be fixed. Yeah, there's another theme, bullying and long-term effects of on victims. You have the LGBT perspective as a gay man, and then you have the suicide and mental health. So really, what I'm trying to say is that this, with you could easily dissect each one of these themes and write another book. Has that occurred to you?
Yes and no. As a, again, writer, yes, I've got a second book and a third book in the works. And I think there's, yes, certainly there's a lot of scope there, and I'm still sort of trying to figure out what sort of areas to focus on. So I've certainly got a couple of themes. I've thought about it, um, but it's still in the very early planning phases. I'm just sort of trying to figure that part out, I suppose. I really love
Mm.
the mental health side. I love the sort of mental health and, being softer, kinder with ourselves, because I think that's the kind of common thread that would be in any book, whether you're gay, whether you have a stutter, whether you have
Mhm.
tried to commit suicide in the past, whether you are dealing with mental health issues on an ongoing basis. It's like that same thread of learning to be kinder to yourself and accepting it and going from there. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I didn't. I wouldn't have ever thought of myself as a writer, and when I started writing the book, I didn't write it as a writer. And now, over time, I've really begun to love writing as a process. You know, I wanted to be fluent. I went to acting school. I loved that aspect of, you know, showing things, telling things, emotion and story. And I see now that writing is just as much that that same craft. You can do all of that in the written word too. And it's been actually a pleasant surprise to myself that I actually like the process now of writing, and would classify myself as a writer. So I think I certainly do have more, I mean, more like sort of books to come. I'm just in that kind of planning phase at the moment.
Excellent, Robert. That's great to hear. Now, now, Robert, there, there is a plan on the stand about a plan in place about using your book as a teacher's guide. Would you like to share a little bit about this?
Yeah, it's a sort of early plan, but it's also one of the biggest reasons why I, you know, do what I do. I wrote the book for my own teenage self, and now for every teenage self out there. And one of the things that I've hoped for it is that it can be of service. It can help younger people. I spent a long time suffering with it, whether it was being gay, whether it was fear, whether it was having a stutter. I carried that for a long time, and I really hope, I really, you know, think that as a sort of learner's guide, it could help teenagers dealing with their own issues, whether they're the same issues or like other issues. It's the same kind of idea of, you aren't alone, you aren't the only one dealing with this. You know, there are other people who've been through it, and there's help out there, and there's nothing wrong, there's nothing to fix. So, as a sort of teacher's guide, given, as you've just said, given that it actually touches on various issues, and also in terms of writing style, I've written the book to be funny, to be easy to actually read. Given that I'm dealing with some very heavy issues, and they're very serious issues. I, you know, wrote the book in a light-hearted way, in the hope that it could be as accessible as as possible to either teachers teaching it, whether that's on a secondary school level, or a university level, or for even professional people, if they have clients. It could be part of a reading guide. Here's a book that might help. So that's like a sort of next like step. It's the next phase of the book, and it's a phase that I think would be very helpful and very exciting.
Great, Robert. That's good to hear. Now, Robert, before we close, do you want to give a shout out to Tightrope and your Tightrope as an improv?
Thank you. Yes, I'll give a shout out. I feel like a sort of jack of all trades. So what I do over in what I do, it's funny. Over in Vancouver, I'm a part of a course run by Tightrope Theatre that brings improv to people who stutter. So because I have a stutter, and I went to Vancouver originally to go to acting school. I've been working with a team at Tightrope theatre. There's the theatre owner, Dan, who is a very expert actor and improviser, and there's also Wendy, who is a professional speech pathologist with her own speech clinic in Vancouver, and we came together and began planning this course, and it's been running for the last year and a half. We have our next course in the fall, and it's been very much like the book on a personal level. As someone who isn't ever going to be fluent and someone who went to acting school, there has been a certain amount of I like sort of grieved the fact that I mightn't ever use my acting skills. And this course, teaching this course to people who have a stutter, knowing what the tools and the skill sets are, has really shown me that learning to have fun with our speech, learning to accept our speech, and to also find our voices, because as people who have stutters, I'm not sure if we find our voice in the same way as fluent speakers do, and I've seen various people taking part in the course who are so happy that they can sing or that they can say things in a funny way, and it shows them that they're more than just their stutter. And so that is the course. It's called the Unblockables, and it's with Tightrope Theatre. All the information is on the website.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Robert. And just to to let our listeners know that I actually have taken the Unblockables course as well. And first, when I had the opportunity to attend, I was very reluctant because I wasn't sure exactly what improv was about. But anyhow, so during the program, I really learned how to to appreciate this program, and it really sort of has helped helped me as a person who stuttered to actually try to come out of my shell. And I mean this 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 program has really sort of um, helped me to actually feel more confident as a person who stutters. So I highly recommend the this program. So okay, Robert, before we end, is there anything else you'd like to say in closing words?
No, nothing other than just thank you very much for having me on, giving me this opportunity to speak and share, and for reading my book. I really appreciate it. So yeah, listen, thank you, thank you to you, Greg, and to everyone else working behind the scenes to make this happen. Thanks very much.
Some Stutter Love is hosted by Greg O'Grady. It is produced, recorded, and edited by Paul De Decker, as well as Luca Dinu, who, by the way, wrote this jazzy theme music. Leah Bugden and Alicia Megison command our pages on Instagram and TikTok. Editing assistance was provided by the Labrador Languages Preservation Laboratory, or Labradory, at the Memorial University of Newfoundland. You can listen to or subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Spotify. Video versions of each episode are found on our YouTube page. Some Stutterla is a production of the Communication Collaborative. Thanks for listening.